Get down on the ground, old man. I won't tell you again." The voice belonged to Officer Miller, sharp, cutting through the afternoon din of Grand Central Terminal like a whip crack. The electric snarl of a taser punctuated his command, a menacing counterpoint to the rhythmic clatter of arriving and departing trains. Before him stood Arthur Jenkins, 92 years old, his frame stooped, but his posture strangely resolute. He clutched a worn brown leather satchel to his chest, its brass clasps dulled with age. His eyes, pale blue and clouded by time, held a flicker of confusion, but no fear. "Young man," Arthur began, his voice raspy, thin as old parchment, "there's truly no need for this alarm." But the crackle intensified, a predatory sound that promised pain. A blue spark leapt. Arthur's body convulsed, a marionette whose strings had been violently yanked, and he fell to the polished marble floor with a sickening thud, the satchel skittering away from his outstretched, trembling hand. The world saw a frail, elderly man, perhaps disoriented, certainly overwhelmed. They didn't see the steel beneath the wrinkles, the history etched into every line on his face. They didn't see a hero. If you believe that true valor deserves unwavering respect, no matter the disguise age might wear, type honor in the comments below. Arthur Jenkins had outlived most of his friends, 2 wives, and even one of his children. He'd seen the world change in ways that still sometimes startled him, from horse-drawn carts on cobbled streets to horseless carriages that now drove themselves. He had served his country in a time when the world itself seemed on the brink of collapse. A young man then, full of fire and a fierce, unwavering belief in the ideals he fought to protect. The medals, the commendations, the faded photographs, they were tucked away, not in a display case, but in that old leather satchel, companions on his infrequent journeys. He lived now in a small, meticulously clean apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up building, his days punctuated by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall and the distant sounds of the city. His movements were slow, deliberate, each one a testament to the long road he had traveled. He was a man of few words. His quiet dignity was often mistaken for aloofness, or worse, senility. Today he was on a mission, a reunion, the last one perhaps, for the few remaining members of the 77th Infantry, the Liberty Ghosts. The train ticket was the first hurdle. The station thrummed with a chaotic energy that prickled at Arthur's senses. Bright digital screens flashed destinations and times, voices blared from unseen speakers, a river of people flowed around him, their faces buried in glowing rectangles. He approached the automated ticketing kiosk, a sleek, impersonal monolith. He squinted at the screen, his fingers gnarled with arthritis, fumbling with the touchscreen. A young woman in a sharp business suit, phone pressed to her ear, tutted loudly behind him, tapping her foot with exaggerated impatience. "Some people have places to be," she muttered, loud enough for him to hear. Arthur felt a familiar flush creep up his neck, but he merely nodded, a silent apology, and continued to wrestle with the machine. He needed a senior discount, but the option was buried under layers of menus he couldn't quite decipher. His quiet struggle soon attracted unwanted attention. "Everything all right here, sir?" The voice was young, laced with an officious tone. Officer Davis, barely out of his 20s, stood beside his partner, Officer Miller, the older of the two by perhaps 5 years, but easily the more cynical. Miller's gaze swept over Arthur's slightly threadbare coat, his worn shoes, the old-fashioned satchel. His eyes narrowed. "You seem to be having some trouble, old-timer. Maybe you should step aside. Let others use the machine." Arthur turned, blinking. "Oh, I was just trying to purchase a ticket for the Veterans Reunion in Albany." He fumbled in his coat pocket for his wallet, his movements slow. Miller exchanged a look with Davis. "A likely story. What's in the bag?" His tone had shifted from condescending to accusatory. "Just personal effects, officer. My papers." Arthur's hand instinctively went to the satchel. "Papers, huh? Let's see them." Davis stepped closer, his stance subtly aggressive. Arthur hesitated. The contents of that bag were private, deeply personal. "I don't see why that's necessary. I'm just trying to buy a ticket." "It's necessary because we say it is," Miller snapped, his patience already thin, wearing through. "You're loitering, causing a disturbance. Either show us what's in the bag, or we'll take you down to the precinct." The accusation of loitering stung Arthur. He who had marched miles under enemy fire, now accused of idleness in a train station. The impatience of the officers was a palpable force, pressing in on him. He could feel the stares of passers-by, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The world, it seemed, had little time for old men who moved too slowly, who didn't understand the new ways. He decided with a sigh to comply. Perhaps if they saw his service medals, they would understand. He fumbled with the stiff brass clasps of the satchel, his fingers, betrayed by age and a touch of tremor, refusing to cooperate. "Hurry it up, Grandpa," Miller barked, his voice laced with contempt. The crowd was growing, a silent, judging circle. Cell phones were already emerging, little electronic eyes recording his humiliation. Arthur finally managed to unlatch one clasp, then the other. He reached inside, his hands searching for the small velvet-lined box that held his distinguished service cross. Perhaps that would satisfy them. As he drew it out, along with a sheath of old brittle papers, Miller, with a sudden, aggressive movement, grabbed for the satchel. "Let me see that." The bag was jerked from Arthur's grasp, its contents spilling onto the cold marble floor. A silver star on a blue ribbon, a purple heart, a small folded American flag. Its stars faded, its stripes worn thin, a sepia-toned photograph of a young man in uniform, his arm around a pretty girl. Arthur gasped, a small, wounded sound. "My things?" He bent to retrieve them, his movements agonizingly slow. Officer Davis kicked a medal aside with the toe of his polished shoe. "What's all this junk?" "Playing war hero, are we?" he sneered. Arthur's face, pale moments before, flushed with a rare surge of anger. "That is not junk, young man. That is a symbol of sacrifice." His voice, though still thin, carried a sudden weight of authority that momentarily surprised the officers. He straightened up, his eyes, though clouded now. "Holding a spark, I demand you treat these items with respect. I am Colonel Arthur Jenkins, retired, United States Army. I was on my way to—" But Miller cut him off, his face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. "Colonel, huh? Sure you are. And I'm the president. You're coming with us. You're clearly delusional. Probably a vagrant." He reached for his handcuffs. Arthur stood his ground, a frail rock against a hostile tide. "I will not be treated this way. I have done nothing wrong." The old soldier in him, dormant for so long, was stirring. He remembered facing down far more dangerous men than these two. The standoff was brief, brutal. Arthur's quiet defiance was met with Miller's escalating aggression. "You're resisting arrest, old man," Miller shouted, his face inches from Arthur's. For a fleeting moment, Arthur thought of his training, the muscle memory that never truly faded. But he was 92. His body was a frail vessel for the spirit that still burned within. He simply stood taller, his chin lifted. "I am merely asserting my rights." That was when Miller unholstered his taser. The distinct, menacing crackle filled the air. "Last chance!" "Get down!" The commuters gasped. A woman screamed. Arthur saw the yellow prongs, the determined glint in Miller's eyes. He thought not of himself, but of the young men he'd led, the ones who hadn't come home. He braced himself. The blue electricity arced. An invisible force slammed into him. His legs buckled. The world tilted, then went dark as he hit the unforgiving floor. The contents of his spilled satchel lay scattered around him like fallen comrades, the silver star, the purple heart, the carefully folded flag, and among them, a small laminated card slightly yellowed with age. Officer Miller, feeling a perverse sense of justification, bent down and picked it up. It was an old Department of Defense identification card. The photo showed a much younger Arthur, stern-faced, in his dress uniform, eagles gleaming on his shoulders. The name read, Colonel Arthur Jenkins. Beneath it, a series of codes and a stark warning. In case of emergency, contact Pentagon Operations. Center, Priority Alpha, Miller scoffed, tossing the card contemptuously onto Arthur's chest. Yeah, right. Priority Alpha. Probably printed it himself at a copy shop, Arthur, groaning, his body a symphony of pain, managed to whisper. His voice barely audible above the surrounding clamor. Operation Nightingale? Contact General Harrison. His eyes fluttered closed. Miller and Davis exchanged a look of smug satisfaction, preparing to drag the vagrant away. 6 minutes. That's all it took. The first indication that the universe was about to recalibrate. Itself was a subtle shift in the ambient noise of the station, distant sirens growing rapidly closer. But these were different from the familiar yelp of city police or fire. These had a deeper, more resonant tone, a sound that spoke of federal authority. Then, a screech of tires from outside the main concourse, followed by another, and another. Heads began to turn. Through the tall glass doors of the station entrance, a stunned silence fell over the gawking crowd as 3 gleaming black SUVs, the kind that absorbed light rather than reflected it, with dark-tinted windows and government plates, muscled their way through the taxi queue, coming to an abrupt, perfectly aligned halt. Doors flew open in unison. 6 men, all dressed in identical dark suits, white shirts, and conservative ties, emerged. They moved with an unnerving, synchronized precision, their eyes constantly scanning, earpieces glinting. One of them, clearly the senior aide, a man with a face like carved granite, spoke urgently into a microphone clipped to his lapel. His gaze swept the concourse, then locked onto the commotion around Arthur. He saw the prone figure of the old man, the 2 uniformed officers standing over him, the scattered medals. His eyes, initially cold and assessing, widened almost imperceptibly. He barked a sharp command into his mic, his voice tight with urgency. Condition red. Target acquired. Platform 3. Potential code Indigo. Secure the area. The other suited men fanned out, their movements economical and purposeful, creating an instant unspoken perimeter. The station's own security guards looked on, bewildered, and suddenly feeling very insignificant. The rear door of the lead SUV opened. A polished black shoe, military, spit-shine bright, planted itself firmly on the pavement. Then another, a figure emerged, unfolding himself from the vehicle with a commanding presence that seemed to suck the very air from his surroundings. He was tall, ramrod straight, his silver hair closely cropped. He wore the immaculate Class A uniform of a 4-star general of the United States Army, his chest a constellation of ribbons and decorations that told a silent, eloquent story of a lifetime of service and command. This was General Marcus Iron Mike Harrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His face, etched with the cares of a nation, was set in a grim line as he strode into the station, his aide a respectful half-step behind. The ambient noise of Grand Central seemed to dim, the usual cacophony muted by the sheer force of his arrival. Local police officers, station personnel, even the previously bold commuters, instinctively stepped back, clearing a path. General Harrison's eyes, sharp and accustomed to surveying battlefields, scanned the scene. They landed on the scattered medals first, a silver star, a purple heart, glinting forlornly on the marble. His gaze then shifted to the elderly man on the ground, surrounded by the 2 local officers, who now looked increasingly uneasy, and then he saw Arthur's face. The general stopped dead, his formidable composure, legendary within the Pentagon, fractured. His jaw tightened. His eyes, which had witnessed the horrors of war and the complexities of global politics, widened in disbelief, then flooded with a potent mixture of shock, profound concern, and a rapidly escalating, thunderous fury. "Arthur," he breathed the name, a rough whisper, then his voice, a command accustomed to echoing across parade grounds and war rooms, boomed through the cavernous space, silencing every other sound. "Colonel Jenkins! Arthur!" He broke into a run, his usual dignified stride forgotten, pushing past the bewildered officers and dropping to one knee beside the fallen veteran. The crowd gasped collectively. The suited men, without a word, moved with swift efficiency, now formally cordoning off the entire platform area. "Nobody in or out," one of them commanded, his voice quiet but absolute. "This platform is now under federal jurisdiction. Clear the area. Now." Grand Central Terminal, for a significant section, had just been shut down. General Harrison gently cradled Arthur's head in his hand. "Arthur, can you hear me? It's Marcus. Marcus Harrison." Arthur's eyelids fluttered open, a flicker of recognition, then a weak smile. "Marcus, my boy, Stunna, you got my message," he rasped, his breath shallow. Harrison's eyes took in the scene with a chillingly swift assessment. The taser wires, still attached to Arthur's thin coat. The angry red marks already forming on his skin where the prongs had struck. The scattered metals, his metals, treated like refuse. A low growl rumbled in the general's chest. He carefully unclipped the taser wires, his movements surprisingly gentle for a man of such imposing stature. Then he rose to his full height, turning to face Officers Miller and Davis. The two young men who minutes before had been puffed up with their minor authority now seemed to shrink, their faces paling under the general's incandescent gaze. "What?" General Harrison began, his voice dangerously soft, each word landing like a hammer blow. "In God's almighty name have you done?" Officer Miller, visibly trembling, stammered, "Sir, General, sir, he was non-compliant. Resisting." "Resisting?" Harrison's voice rose, echoing off the marble. "This man." His arm swept towards Arthur, who was now being carefully attended by two of the general's own medical team, who had materialized as if from nowhere. "Is Colonel Arthur Jenkins, United States Army retired. He is a decorated hero of 3 wars. He didn't play war hero, officer. He is one. He led the legendary Ghost Regiment through the Ardennes when I was still in diapers. He personally saved my life and the lives of my entire platoon during the siege of Al-Qadar, storming an enemy machine gun nest with nothing but a pistol and 2 grenades after our comms went down." He bent down, picking up the tarnished silver star that Davis had kicked. He held it up, the medal, glinting under the station lights. "This isn't a piece of junk, son. This is a testament to courage you can only dream of. This specific medal was awarded because Colonel Jenkins, then a captain, held a vital bridgehead for 72 hours under constant artillery and infantry assault with a decimated company until reinforcements arrived. He was wounded twice but refused evacuation." The general's eyes bored into Miller and Davis. "And you tased him? A 92-year-old man, a national hero, because he was, what, fumbling for his wallet, confused by your ticketing machine, and inconvenienced to your oh-so-important schedule?" The station manager, a portly man in a cheap suit, had rushed to the scene, his face a mask of horror as he pieced together what had transpired. He began to babble apologies, but General Harrison silenced him with a single icy glare. The 2 officers looked as though they wished the marble floor would swallow them whole. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a stark, career-ending terror. Arthur, propped up now by a medic, raised a trembling hand. "Marcus, it was a misunderstanding. Sir, they're young. They didn't know." The sheer, unadulterated grace of the old soldier, even after such an ordeal, seemed to momentarily stun everyone present. General Harrison looked at his old mentor, his expression softening from incandescent rage to profound respect and affection. "Arthur, your capacity for forgiveness always astounded me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He then turned back to the now ashen-faced officers and the rapidly assembling brass of the city's police department, including a deputy. chief who had arrived, siren screaming, looking utterly mortified. "A misunderstanding," General Harrison repeated, his voice regaining its steely edge, "that nearly cost this nation one of its finest. A misunderstanding that will be investigated at the highest levels. You can be assured, Deputy Chief, that the Department of Defense, and indeed my office, will be taking a very personal interest in the outcome of that investigation, and in the immediate retraining of your officers in de-escalation, veteran sensitivity, and basic human decency." The deputy chief, sweating profusely despite the air conditioning, could only nod, his face grim. "Yes, General, absolutely, General." He turned to his men. "Officers Miller and Davis, you will surrender your badges and service weapons. You are suspended pending a full inquiry." His voice was flat, devoid of any support for his subordinates. Miller and Davis looked utterly broken, their careers, their reputations dissolving before their eyes on the cold marble floor of Grand Central. The crowd, which had been watching in stunned silence, began to murmur. Shame was writ large on many faces. Some who had been filming the initial confrontation now sheepishly lowered their phones, the earlier amusement or indignation replaced by a dawning uncomfortable respect for the old man they had so readily dismissed. General Harrison personally helped Arthur to his feet, supporting his frail frame. "You were on your way to the 77th reunion in Albany, weren't you, Colonel?" he asked gently. Arthur nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Yes. Didn't want to miss it. Might be the last one." "Well," the general said, a warm smile finally breaking through his stern demeanor, "you won't miss it, and you'll arrive with a proper escort this time." He gestured towards one of the black SUVs, its door already held open by an aide. The paramedics gently guided Arthur towards it, treating him with a reverence usually reserved for visiting royalty. The reverberations of that afternoon at Grand Central were felt far and wide. Colonel Arthur Jenkins, after a thorough medical checkup at Walter Reed, did indeed make it to his reunion in Albany, arriving in a military transport, much to the astonishment and pride of his few remaining comrades. Officers. Miller and Davis faced a disciplinary board. Miller was dismissed from the force, and Davis was relegated to a desk job, pending extensive retraining and psychological evaluation. The city's police department, under intense scrutiny and pressure from veterans organizations and the Pentagon, fast-tracked a comprehensive new training program focusing on community interaction, de-escalation techniques, and specific protocols for engaging with elderly citizens and veterans. The station manager at Grand Central arranged for a small, dignified plaque to be installed near the ticketing area, not mentioning the incident directly, but bearing a simple inscription: "Honor those who served. Respect your elders. Their sacrifices built our present." This incident served as a stark, painful reminder that heroes often walk among us, their valor hidden beneath the ordinary cloak of everyday life, their sacrifices unseen, their stories untold, until a moment of crisis brings them into the light. It underscored the profound truth that respect is not a currency to be earned by appearance or status, but a fundamental right owed to every human being, particularly those who have dedicated their lives to the service of others. We must never be too quick to judge, too swift to dismiss, for the unassuming stranger beside us might just be a giant whose shoulders once bore the weight of the world. The true measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable and its most venerable. At the 77th Infantry Division reunion dinner, Colonel Arthur Jenkins, frail but visibly invigorated, stood to give a toast. He raised his glass, his hand remarkably steady. Beside him, General Marcus Harrison stood, beaming, a proud subordinate once more in the presence of his old commander. Arthur didn't speak of Grand Central. He spoke of camaraderie, of shared history, of the enduring bonds forged in fire. He spoke of looking out for one another, and as he sat down to a standing ovation, the quiet dignity that had always defined him shone brighter than any medal. The heroes are still with us. Sometimes quiet, sometimes unassuming, but always deserving of our deepest gratitude. Their stories are woven into the fabric of our nation. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more stories that uncover the hidden courage and honor that surrounds us every day. If you believe in respecting those who've given so much, type respect and share this.